Good morning. Welcome, everybody. My name is Lori Davey. I'm the Vice President of Enterprise Markets at GCI, and I'm also on the Arctic Economic Council as one of the U.S. business representatives. And I'm from Alaska, born and raised in Tok. In fact, Aaron Shett his dad was my fifth grade teacher, so like we say in Alaska, we are kind of a small community. We do kind of all know each other and interact on a number of different levels. And that's kind of what the Arctic is as well, is we are still a pretty small community, and it's great to have so many different people coming here from all over the Arctic and coming back together. It's been quite a while since COVID, and we've missed a lot of our foreign international meetings that we had been on before. Today we're going to talk about capital and connectivity, two of my favorite subjects. And they go together. You know, we know that especially since COVID, nobody ever needed more internet than during COVID. When we all had to go home and work, live, educate, healthcare, everything came through that. But there was a lot of areas in Alaska that we don't have the same connectivity as everybody else. And I know that it's that way across much of the Arctic too. Some areas have better connectivity than others, but it's an area that we really struggle with still, and it's a major difference between who has connectivity and who doesn't. So I want to kind of go through and give everybody an opportunity to give some opening comments and give us some perspective on what matters to you as far as connectivity and capital and how the two intersect if they do in your business. We'll start with you, Trina.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I must say that the more I listen to the speakers here, the more I'm convinced about the perspective and the potential of Anchorage, Alaska, to become the hub of the Arctic innovation. I think you have all it's needed to make it. And I come from Finland. We call ourselves a country of connections. It's not only because of Nokia, but of course Nokia is one of the pillars of our sort of experience of being a high-tech, digitalized country. And I had a chance to meet a CEO of one of the leading companies in Finland in connection business. And he was very enthusiastic about the opportunities opening up in the high north, and about the smart cable project that his company is leading. And he shared this perspective and vision of high north becoming the sort of the digitalized north, and also that was one of the reasons why his company together with the partners is now investing more than $1 billion in this smart cable connection that connects not only 3 continents from Asia to Europe via this northwest passage, but it's connecting also all these areas on the route. And this is an enormous potential, I think, to all of us.
Good morning. My name's Hugh Short. It's an honor to be asked, Lori. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm from Bethel, Alaska, which is about 400 miles west of this conference center. And Bethel, Alaska, my first introduction to GCI was in 2008, 2007, when GCI built out something called Terra Southwest, which is a network of microwave towers across western Alaska. Bethel became the hub of a mix between fiber and microwave towers to get internet there. This past year, I was able to work with GCI to get potentially fiber to Bethel, which I didn't think was actually ever going to happen in my lifetime. If you've been to Bethel, raise your hand. I'm curious. Holy cow, really? Well, it's a little bit swampy and tundra. So the smart people at GCI really came up with an innovative plan to deliver fiber to Bethel, and being a part of that is a pleasure. I also have the interesting position of being one of the largest investment groups in Iceland's largest mobile phone company. So I watch Alaska and our challenges with technology and juxtapose that with Iceland and what Iceland has done. I think it has something, it's almost, I think it's Iceland and Finland have the most fiber connections to their residents. It's like 88%, 90% of their population has access to fiber. And so you look at our challenges in Alaska, obviously, it's 21 Icelands to make one Alaska. I'm not sure how many Finlands, but I'm gonna guess 10. We have no roads. It's a challenge in Alaska. But I think that if you take the theme of connectivity and to the broadest sense of just internet connections and people being able to do team calls and Zoom calls and being able to work from home and being able to, unfortunately, go to school from home, and all of these things we've had to experience the past 2 years, there is amazing things happening here in Alaska over the next 3-5 years. Rural Alaska will be transformed with federal investment into broadband. I think our biggest challenge is going to be how do we work together to get the broadband dollars into the most effective projects without fighting over who gets what. That's going to be the challenge. That's a brief introduction.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Rob Gillum. I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you, Lori, for inviting us and putting the panel together. Thank you, Ambassador, for the challenge. Anchorage gladly accepts. We are happy to be the innovation hub, and we look forward to partnering with Finland to do it. My family is relatively new to Alaska. Came to Fairbanks only about 100 years ago, a little less than 100 years ago, so hopefully that puts a little bit of perspective. And I'll say this, I'm someone who's very positive about Alaska and positive about the Arctic in general, but I think what positive or what bullishness misses is how do you get there? And connectivity is one of the means to the end of getting there. But Rachel challenged us yesterday to lean in a little bit and ask the tough questions and think maybe a little bit outside the box. So here's the mind bender. Connectivity we think about as broadband, fair enough. But connectivity is also people and culture. When you're talking about making investment in places that are off the road system or far away or quite rural, you're the outsider. Alaska has a phrase, all of you Alaskans in the room know this, if you're not from here, you're from outside with a capital O. Remember that when you come to a community and you have this great idea of what needs to be done, you're the capital O. So I think connectivity is not just about money, and it's not just about broadband, it's about people, and it's about relationships. So I think that's a really important point, and hopefully we'll all talk about it as we move along. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mads Fredriksen, and I'm based in Tromsø, where I work for the Arctic Economic Council, where GCI is a highly valued member. And I think it's interesting when we talk about connectivity and we look back at some of the words we heard yesterday. You know, we heard about people and communities, obviously, and we heard about connectivity and data being important. And I was questioning, why is it that we hear this again and again across all the panels? And I think it's because to unlock the full potential of the Arctic region, this region of opportunities, we need connectivity and we need people. I mean, without the people and without the connectivity, we're not going to achieve all the opportunities. And what are those opportunities? We got fish to feed the world, and there's a growing population. We're just 4 million people in the Arctic region. We got a lot of sustainable coast fishing, so fish to feed the world. We got energy to power industries, that's oil and gas, but it's also renewable energy, and hydrogen is the new future. And then we got mining and resources. So if you want to drive that Tesla, if you want to have that cell phone, if you want to have that wind turbine, you need to dig in the ground and you need to get some raw materials. And all of that we got in the Arctic. But we're not going to get access to that without connectivity. Connectivity is what facilitates it. and what enables it and unlock the opportunities. And the same goes with the people. And I think that should be the obvious one. I think sometimes if you go south of the Arctic, you forget that you need people to explore all of these opportunities, and you need to invest in people. And connectivity is really what allows people to move to a region, to work from there, to work remotely. If you want to enable entrepreneurship and all of this, you need connectivity. It gives you health, it gives you education, and so on. So I think it's a very, very important topic, and the key question here is how do we get the capital then? Because we all know that connectivity is an issue. How do we get the money? Thank you.
You know, when we think about connectivity and growth and the Arctic's rural north, those are very important topics. And for the Department of Homeland Security, protecting and advancing U.S. security and economic interests in the entire U.S. Arctic is very important, and it's top of mind. You know, DHS is committed to exploring and adapting to new and innovative ways to facilitate the secure flow of trade and travel in the region. And we talk about expansion and we look at things like the expansion at the port of Nome. Certainly DHS is going to play a very important role in that facilitation of that flow. But when we think about really what's at the heart of that and what's so important, particularly in this region, is the engagement at the local community level, in particular the local tribal level. I like to say that local challenges require local solutions. And so it's going to be very important for the Department of Homeland Security to engage in two-way conversation and dialogue and really listen as we're developing policies so we understand the intended and the unintended consequences. And, you know, I had the great fortune this week of engaging with U.S. Coast Guard, and particularly the 17th District and Rear Admiral Moore and his team, who are true professionals and really the best in the world at what they do. But one of the things that was really remarkable through all my conversations with them is to talk about the engagement at the local and tribal level and how important that was to them, how near and dear that was to them, and how they wanted to protect that. So I'm very heartened to know that for the Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Coast Guard is that tip of the spear for our engagement at the local level. And I feel good about us developing and learning and growing and really being able to come at the table with that balance that we talked about. And finally, I'll close with being a little girl growing up in rural South Carolina. Throughout my career, I got the opportunity to engage in policy conversations that related to, rural South Carolina. And I say that my engagement there was very important because that was my perspective, that was the lens in which I view the world, and that was my lived experience. And so the robust conversations on those policy issues, I think, were impacted, and certainly I think the policy decisions were impacted. And I say that to say the representation is extremely important. Holistic representation is very important. Now, I had the great fortune of being able to be a part or listen in on the breakaway session on Indigenous women yesterday. And I want to tell you the women on that panel were dynamic, thorough, and very, very knowledgeable. And I spent my time writing notes throughout the whole time. And so I'm really excited when I go back to DC. One of the things I'm going to do is certainly reach out and look to grow and expand that conversation and understanding of context at the local level. So very excited to be here.
Thank you, everyone. And yesterday I learned I was exciting to hear about the change of the term from icebreaker to pole Arctic security, because that is what we are talking about with that. And so it's exciting to have some of the technology and everything coming back up to the north. And thank you all for your opening comments. Now we're going to kind of go into some prepared questions, and I'll direct them to one or two of you, but anybody else who wants to add into it, feel free to. The first one to Hugh. Your company has invested in a number of different Arctic countries and opportunities. What in the Arctic makes investment attractive to you, and how do you bring other partners to it?
This is where I go to my notes. Well, I think there's a few things. To Rob's point, when we first showed up in Iceland in 2015, 2016, PT Capital, I would take meetings with anyone. I'd show up, we being me, maybe Meade Treadwell on some trips, and we would just take meetings. And being the outsider, you're coming into Iceland, it was a completely different dynamic when we showed up. They were so hungry for outside investors in Iceland that we didn't have a problem taking a meeting. We didn't have a problem actually getting investment opportunities. It was The way they described it in Iceland was, we have been so cross-invested with each other that having an outsider, having an Alaskan, actually gives these companies more strength, because it's a different voice, it's a different, you're not related, you don't have a familial connection, you're not someone who has to be nice to someone because we live on an island. So I think that that's an interesting component that I believe exists across the Arctic. I think the other piece about why the Arctic makes a lot of sense is tourism is moving north. If you look at the trends in tourism right now, the biggest trends are moving north. So Alaska in 2021, we've got an investment in a helicopter tour company, 2 of them. We had a 79% increase from 2019 to 2021 in tours. 79% increase. We could not keep up with the demand for that experience. In Iceland, we had an 89% occupancy rate in July of 2021. Our 2019 occupancy rate was 88%. We exceeded our 2019 occupancy rate for July. So if you look at what people are looking for today when they travel, they're looking for experiences. They're looking for, I want to see a glacier. I want to go to nature. I want to go to the north of Finland. I want to see a volcano. They want exotic experiences. The travelers are younger. They're more independent. They have more money. They have more time. Before COVID, the average stay in Iceland was 5 to 6 days. In 2021, it was 11 days. People doubled their time in the country. If you actually add up the number of tourist days in 2021, it was greater than 2019. People are spending more money and they're staying longer. And that's the trend we're going to continue to see in the north. And I think you look to Greenland. Greenland has said they want to do it right. They don't want the country to be overwhelmed with tourism. Iceland was overwhelmed. They had a tidal wave of tourists after 2010, and it took them 10 years to catch up. Actually, COVID, from a government standpoint, allowed them to take a deep breath, build bathrooms, build roads, build the infrastructure necessary to handle 2.5 million people, maybe 3 million people. So the 2 years that tourists really took a break, the government was able to take a deep breath and catch up. So I think, those are a couple of reasons I think it's an interesting space.
Anyone else have any comments on that one? Okay. Now, I'll turn this one to Rob. How has connectivity and different projects impacted your guys' investment decisions, or has it?
No, I mean, it absolutely has. I'll give you two different connectivities, your type of connectivity and the people type of connectivity. So McKinley has a couple investments out in the Aleutians, King Cove and Port Muller. So that's Port Muller is about 500 miles from here, and King Cove is almost 900 miles from here. So in those two investments, just to do things like pay the bills, you've heard of corporate treasury companies pay the bills out of the home office. We couldn't do that in those investments because we couldn't actually connect to get information about who we owed how much. And so we had to push it out, to the local community to do that. So I think just dealing with the basics of paying paying employees and accounts receivable and payables, those basic building, skill or building blocks of business are difficult in remote communities. In terms of connectivity, it's all about the people. When we made our investment in King Cove, I was on an airplane a few months after that, and the little bell goes off and everybody stands up to exit, and I was getting my bag down and somebody literally from behind hugs me and says, "Oh, thank you so much," which is a little terrifying during COVID. And it turns out it was one of the community leaders in King Cove saying thank you for bringing capital and the opportunity to connect with the citizens of King Cove. So I think, again, connectivity is really important. It's that ingredient that makes an investment work.
Matt?
Yeah, so I think it's also important to look at it. Is it capital that comes first or connectivity that comes first? Because a lot of investors, when I speak to them about the Arctic, they are saying that, you know, the Arctic competes in international, you know, environment. So you benchmark not with, you know, it's not Alaska and Canada fighting for the money, it's Alaska and the world fighting for the money. And what we really showed we saw during COVID was that there's a digital divide. You know, there's a connectivity gap that needs to be closed, and that would also help attract investments. But we need to invest in connectivity first. And so one is that we need to be equal with the ones we are competing against for capital, but it's also about getting data. You know, so if you're an investor, you look at data, and to get that data, you quite often need some form of connectivity. So if you look at mining sites, if you look at shipping, you know, you want to know where you're investing and what you're investing in. So you need the connectivity, and I think the economy of scale is a challenge across the Arctic. So we need public-private partnerships when it comes to connectivity. And then I'm sure that other capital will go, but we need, you know, just a small percentage. It doesn't have to be 50-50, but we need the government to have a bit of skin in the game and invest in connectivity, and then other capital will flow, I'm sure.
Yeah, I totally agree, especially with what Rob was talking about with the Aleutians, and GCI is working on bringing fiber there, so I think by 2024 we're going to have King Cove. But you look at major industries that are still operating on satellite and how hamstrung they are, and we're competing with global economies for our resources, and it is a huge impact. Tina, in Finland, they obviously have significantly more connectivity than we do in Alaska, and you were describing in one of our earlier conversations how Finland has like an inward migration of people. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, well, that is, it's very interesting what has happened in Finland actually during the last 5-10 years, and especially in the eastern and northern parts of Finland, where they suffered from depopulation. Young people, and people left villages, and now, and I think it is due to digitalization and to communication again. These areas, and especially the north of Finland, is offering young people and people, entrepreneurs, and especially in the tourism sector, which is indeed one of the fastest growing sectors also in Finland, new opportunities to work there or to work online. So this has actually diverted the trend so that people are coming back to the villages and to the north. I discussed that issue 2 weeks ago in one village in Finnish Lapland, and the mayor said that it is actually amazing how many people have returned back to the village, and now how they look the possibilities, you know, from a completely new perspective, having these connections and having especially services digitalized more and more, and this is the trend, because travelers want to have high quality, high class services, and there you need all the digital and new, you know, communication tools to develop these services and to connect to people and to other services, so that it creates an interesting and attractive sort of ecosystem for the whole industry.
I just add one quick point to that. You know, in terms of tourism and how important that is to the Arctic and to the region. You know, one thing at Department of Homeland Security we talk a lot about is traveler experience. So they have to get to the destination, and so we're working very hard to enhance those experiences, whether it's through our TSA or through U.S. Customs and Border Protection, to make sure that the experience that the traveler is having is seamless, and we're using, you know, innovative technology in order to do that. And I think that's going to be a big component in terms of encouraging tourism to the region as well.
And Tasha, this next one's for you also. How does connectivity impact connectivity in the Arctic as we're continuing to grow out our fiber infrastructure, and we'll continue to do more so? In your opinion, how does that impact Arctic security with greater connectivity?
You know, first of all, I think about, you know, how that creates instant and real-time information. So things from, you know, a shipping vessel that's in distress, being able to get to it as soon as possible and identify where it is and what the issues are as soon as possible is really important. What I also think about in some of the rural areas when we think about man-made and natural disasters and being able to communicate instantaneously with people in the community on what the issues are and to communicate a certain perspectives of that is really important. And then another important aspect of that I don't think that we think a lot about, but the role that the community plays in keeping the nation secure. And we call it, see something, say something at the Department of Homeland Security. And it's really important that we have the local communities engaged in giving us information so we are aware of things that we otherwise would not be privy to know.
I've got a couple questions coming in from the audience, and we're going to switch over to that in a minute, but I wanted to do one more question around public-private partnerships. And GCI has been very successful in leveraging federal funds with private funds to help build out Terra, Fiber to Dutch Harbor, and a number of other areas. Can you guys give us some examples or how you see potential public-private partnerships continuing to help drive investment in the Arctic?
So maybe I'll take that one. I would say that you have to think about public-private partnerships in the broader sense, so not just the very structured, what GCI is so great at doing, but just in general, when public money flows into some project, think of the infrastructure bill and the monies that are flowing into local and rural communities across Alaska, how can you coordinate that or leverage that for future investment? So one of the biggest costs in rural Alaska is mobilizing anything, construction crew, whatever, to a local community. Once you've done that, well, then you should do everything else in that community that you want to do, even if it's not part of the grant or the public funds that are coming in. And so that kind of coordination and advanced communication is, in effect, a public and a private partnership. It's just not technically part of the P3. So I think that kind of communication, Valerie said it yesterday from ANTHC about, the friction of grant writing. It's the same thing, about mobilization. There's this friction, and once you break that friction and put investment opportunities in a rural community, you want to maximize that.
If you look at the landscape right now of projects people are proposing for solutions, whether it be low orbit Earth satellites or fiber or microwave technology or other innovative ideas, the biggest challenge we're going to have is how does this public money actually coordinate the private sector? How does the private sector work together to propose sustainable projects that have a solid business plan behind them, that ultimately will not shut down because CapEx wasn't funded, because the project was flawed in the beginning? And that's a difficult conversation because you've got tribes who are now receiving I think it's $1 billion of NTIA money, who are now trying to partner and figure out how to put the best project together. You have companies like GCI, which are very large billion-dollar companies, publicly traded, that are looking to build out their infrastructure. You have Alaska Native corporations who are coming in and trying to build out infrastructure. So that how that private money actually coordinates with the public dollars is either going to be an amazing success story or it's going to be a disaster in some places. And I think the responsibility is really upon Alaskans to figure out how to best respond, coordinate, build out in a strategy the best way to blanket Alaska and high-speed broadband. It's going to be a significant challenge.
Thank you. I'm going to switch over to some audience questions. Here's one that's a pretty broad one. Given your points of view, what are the top concerns regarding future development?
I mean, we just did a study in the Arctic Economic Council on banks and insurance companies and pension funds trying to stop investments in the Arctic. So if you don't live in the Arctic, you believe that we're a region full of polar bears and living in igloos, and that's it. People don't have a full understanding of what the Arctic is, and that's a massive challenge regarding capital, because you got pension funds saying we're not going to invest in the region because we want to protect the region, and I think this has an effect. So this is mainly with an energy project, but it also affects connectivity projects. And quite often you will have a big mining company coming in and investing in connectivity, building schools, building roads, and so on. And they do this, and this benefits, the public sector. It's not only for the company itself, it actually benefits the whole community. But they need to be able to raise capital. And I think that's because of, we are the region that feels climate change the most, speed, heating 3 times the average. So we are like the poster boy for climate change. And that makes it difficult to get capital in the future. That's what I fear. So we need to change the story. We need to say we have the solutions to help the rest of the world, that the world needs our energy, they need our raw material, they need our fish.
I would challenge every single person in the room, when you hear that from New York or one of the money centers, invite whoever says no to come and see. ESG is this fancy term for environmental, social, and governance restrictions. That's what the banks will say. They won't come to Alaska or they won't come to the Arctic to invest. At the end of the day, they're still investing in electric vehicles and batteries, and they still need what we have here to do that. So I think a little bit of education, again, a friendly come and see, come and look at it, look at the challenges, don't forget the S, the social. It's really, really important. And just yelling and screaming and stomping your feet and saying you're a jerk from New York, probably not gonna work. So I might suggest that you invite them to come and see.
Maybe one thing which Nova, which is our telecom in Iceland, we saw a 60% increase from July of 2019 to July of 2021 in data usage on our mobile network, 60% increase. The unintended impact of that, or the consequence, is we are spending all of our advertising money right now on mental health. People are on their phone, they're on, I've got a 13-year-old, TikTok, they're constantly scrolling, and the mental health of our youth is a significant unintended consequence of connectivity. We are giving away free alarm clocks so people don't use their phone in the bedroom. We are pushing, and we're in the data business, but we're saying don't use your phone because it has unintended consequences on your mental health. So I'd say that that's something that no one's really talking about.
Maybe just to add from the Finnish perspective, I think that our Arctic know-how is very much based on the everyday functioning of the society, so that people have assurance that schools function, that healthcare functions, that services in public services mainly. So it's very much about public services, and I think we have not really recognized the value of functioning public services as part of the also the what the companies and investors need to have in order to be attracted by the Arctic regions and countries, and public-private that leads to that of course the question of how to and even how to sort of commercialize the public services that are being developed in the Arctic.
And I would just add really quickly, as we talk about, the connectivity and expansion of broadband, I'd be remiss from a Department of Homeland Security perspective, and I didn't say that it certainly increases vulnerability and risk, right, from adversaries that would try to do harm or to infiltrate that flow of connectivity. So I think it's really important that we're making sure that this is done in a very secure way, and we're thinking about the ramifications of as we push this out. So just want to flag that for everyone.
Thank you, and I was surprised not to hear workforce development, but that's one of the things that I certainly worry about with the infrastructure dollars that we have coming to Alaska. We simply don't have enough people of the right skill set to do the work that we need to do. So hopefully we will find some of that inward migration and bring people back home too. So kind of in line with that, one of the audience questions is, with regards to connectivity, how can we navigate the challenges of creating economies of scale in places in the Arctic where there's a sparse market?
Has to be global. We talked about this a little bit yesterday in the panel that I hosted. There's this concept in investment called TAM, total addressable market, right? So when you build a product, you usually a software-oriented product. You want to have lots of people who can use it. Maybe it's an app on the phone or whatever. I see, Mead, you're laughing about my TAM again. So, but total addressable market, you can do something from anywhere that isn't necessarily targeted because of connectivity, that isn't necessarily targeted at only the people who are there. If you can build a software solution, there's some video games, for example, that are being recreated. Some of the software, that 60 hertz energy that Piper mentioned yesterday, is created in UPIC. So I think if you can create something that has a bigger market than where you're based, then all of a sudden it's less relevant that you're in a community of 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 people, and you can really connect to the world. And that's the benefit of connectivity, is remote work becomes everybody's at the office. They just have a better view.
You know, I hosted one of the largest tourism companies in Iceland 2 weeks ago. They spent a week here, and this idea of scalability, and what I learned that week looking at potential investment opportunities was that if someone goes on a hiking vacation to Iceland, the next year they're going to go on a hiking vacation, and why not Alaska? And then the next year they're going to hike, why not Greenland? And then the next year, why not Lapland's? So why not build a scalable company that provides that experience, where that person is going to be a decade customer who goes on hiking trips every year with their family, and now you're offering streamlined vacation experience, guided tours, hotels, attractions, all of the things. And now instead of saying, well, Greenland's too small, or Alaska's too small, or Iceland's too small, now you have a scalable market where you're connecting and you're bringing operational expertise from other Arctic nations. So this guy, 60,000 people on a glacier per summer, per year. 60,000 people. Now that number here in Alaska, I know some glacier companies, they're in maybe the less than 10,000, so they've scaled. And so it's, how do you actually get people who understand the business to invest in Alaska who are in other Arctic locations? How do you get people to invest into Greenland who have operational expertise in other Arctic locations? And how do you do it in a way that is with the community, sustainable, and there's stakeholders and investors at the local level? I think that, to me, I think it's a misnomer. I think the Arctic market is huge. I think it's growing faster than any other market. And I think you just got to think bigger if you think it's too small.
I do agree with that, and there was an interesting survey done in Finland, and the Finnish companies were asked how they see this Arcticness of, what is the Arctic business for them, and many of them didn't even realize that they were doing the Arctic business, though they had been dealing with with these markets for years and years, and then the second answer was that they have been developing their products in harsh winter conditions, and if the product is solid and sustainable enough, it will manage in other markets. But they had their perspective was global market. And this is where the scalable issue comes in the front row. The Arctic market for many is too small, but it is an interesting market if it can be sort of seen as part of the global market for their business interests.
And that's why, with increased connectivity, the economy of scale becomes less and less important. The economy of scale is an issue if there's no connectivity. If you're not connected to the outside world, if you cannot make an app, sitting in a small village, then you got an issue. But if you're connected online and you can actually, use your 3D printer and make an app and so on in your village, economy of scale is not an issue because suddenly you got the whole world as a market. The same goes for shipping, physical infrastructures and so on. If you're connected somehow, it's not a big issue. And I think, demographic is a major issue also when for investors coming in. But we got more autonomous vehicles, we got more autonomous shipping and so on, especially in the mining industry. That's the future. Again, you need connectivity, and economy of scale, and the challenges with demographics becomes less.
Thank you. So kind of on that same line, Mads, there's a question from the audience about speaking to the intersection between connectivity and renewable energy in the Arctic. And I remember when we went to Sweden a few years ago, we went to the mine that was completely automated. That's something that certainly would be a goal for Alaska's mines and being able to be economically more viable. But can you describe any other places where you've seen connectivity and renewable energy opportunities?
Yeah. And here it's going to be more physical infrastructures connectivity, but the investments in hydrogen across the Arctic is massive. Ammonia and methanol and so on, because we're located on top of the world, connecting 85% of the world's economies because of the Northern Hemisphere. And the investments in shipping, and when it comes to hydrogen, that's the future. So that's a renewable. We got a lot of renewable energy. It could also be using LNG to make hydrogen, and that's the future of shipping. So that's definitely one. And there's also, you got LKAB, the oldest and largest, and not the oldest, but one of the largest iron mines in the world, 130 years old. They're investing a lot in renewables right now, because they know everyone needs iron in the future, but people want green iron. So they're investing in hydrogen now. And they're also investing in connectivity, physicals and online connectivity, because that's what they have to do. And you can just, I really think with an added value from a lot of renewables is the data collection you get. So you sell it to researchers, and you says, we're going to put up wind turbines here, and we're going to sell you this data, and you can use this data for something else. So that's another added value in renewables and connectivity.
Anyone else on that one? No.
I just want to give Rob credit because this is a carbon neutral bottle. So, I think that though it's not renewable energy, I think what Rob knows and what the folks traveling to the Arctic want is awareness of carbon emissions. I think it's critically important that we as a people, as an Arctic people, focus on how do we reduce our carbon emissions, how do we preserve and protect our resources. And so I think we're getting the demand. Our helicopter tourism company is taking its first step to being carbon neutral this summer. And Alpine Air Alaska and Vertical Solutions will be carbon neutral on our tourism business in 2022. And that demand is not coming from any specific one place. It's coming from customers, it's coming from investors, it's coming from pension funds, it's coming from suppliers, it's coming from the vast majority. So I think the sustainability question is, and I give credit to Finland and frankly Europe and Iceland, we're much more aware of this, where I think Alaska, we're playing catch up a little bit. And so I think what you've done in Finland's amazing. So I think that's a piece of it.
And let's end on that too. So I think my last statistic I recall was that Finland is 97% renewable. Is that correct? And it's pretty high. Iceland and Finland are definitely two of the most renewable countries in the Arctic that we have. And how do you see Alaska, Canada, and some of the more remote regions gaining better access to renewable energy?
Well, unfortunately, Finland is not quite there yet, but we are struggling. And I think now with the new situation in Europe, I think we all have to decrease our dependence on gas and oil and invest in renewables. So you have to use all the sources you have. We don't have, we do have sun, solar energy is one of the options, but it's not so important for us than it is for Spaniards in the south of Europe, but the means we have. I mean, we have to, and we have innovated also. Constantly put on research and innovation. I think Alaska has a lot of resources and innovation, you know, and power and willingness to change. That's what you need. So it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a long time, but we will all have to do it.
There's some great entrepreneurs here at the conference that specialize in climate tech innovation. And that's where Alaska can play a role catching up, is innovation.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate the audience participation and especially our panelists for joining me here today. I think we are up on a break right now, so we will see you back here in about 10 minutes, I think. Thank you.